Hello and welcome to today's session of the GMAT training. My name is Ken Moragori and I'm a GMAT trainer with the Kenya IELTS program. So today we'll be handling a very important aspect of sentence correction, which is identifying the subject. We'll be covering the importance of knowing what subject is being referred to in the sentence to help you handle the question as it should be handled. So basically, a complete sentence must have a subject or an object and a working verb. So we say subject or object because if it's in the active voice, it has to have a subject. And if it's in the passive voice, it can have only an object and it won't have a subject. So because the majority of the sentences that we'll find in GMAT are in active voice, we'll mostly be dealing with subjects and the other aspects of the sentence. So the majority of the areas of interest in sentence correction, the ones which are most popularly tested, they require correct identification of the subject. So some of these areas include a subject-verb agreement, modifiers, comparisons, and meaning. And we will see some examples of these so that we can know how you identify the subject and its influence on the way you handle your answer choice. So what do we look out for? So first is the subject, singular or plural. Of course, these will come in several aspects of, say, subject-verb agreement or pronoun agreement, etc. Then is the subject underlined. So this means that probably this has to do with meaning. So meaning maybe the placement of the subject may change. And then is the subject being compared to something. So here we'll be testing the validity of the comparison. Sometimes, mostly in comparison, you find you have, say, the girl's book being compared to the boy. Of course, now we know this is not a valid comparison, and it all changes because of this possessive form. So it's very critical to find out or identify what your subject is, and then that will help you judge whether the comparison is valid or not. And then, does the subject have a modifier? So if it has a modifier, sometimes because the sentences in sentence correction are quite lengthy, the modifier now may kind of distract you and you kind of forget the subject that is comes before the modifier. So if you have a very long modifier here, then you have a verb that should agree with this subject, it's very easy for us to take, say, a noun that is inside the modifier to go with this verb, which of course it's costly in sentence correction. So the identification of a subject is very important. Now we'll look at a couple of examples of how to identify these subjects practically and how important they are. So we'll be doing questions, say short questions, not full questions, so that we can go through a number of examples. So we have this example here. So it's just two answer choices shortened, so that we can focus on the subject at hand. Yeah, so go ahead and pause and then we'll discuss. So our sentence reads, in addition to the increase in hourly wages that were requested last July, the railroad employees are now seeking an expanded program of retirement benefits. So from this example, of course, we can tell the meaning straight away that the railroad employees, they got an increase in, or they requested to be increased their hourly wages. And then now, that was last July, and now they are seeking an expanded program of retirement benefits. So let's look at A. In addition to the increase in our, so of course A is the same as the question. So looking at A, we can see that if you do not consider the first part, this second part, just the phrasing of it is a bit different from our option B. So option A has the railroad employees and option B has the employees of the railroad. We know, of course, that is exactly the same meaning. We would start thinking about that if we were down to conciseness. But remember, conciseness comes last, so we have to look at grammar first. So if you weren't careful about subjects, you'd end up now trying to eliminate either A or B based on these, which is trivial in this case. It's not important. So how subject now comes in, if we read now, this the part that I've put in parentheses. So in addition to the increase in hourly wages that were requested last July, so on first read, doesn't seem wrong. It actually sounds right. But if you look here, increase in hourly wages that were requested, you see that is a plural form of that verb. And it doesn't seem wrong because of the noun that comes just before that verb. But if you read carefully, what was requested? So just ask yourself that what was requested? Is it the wages or is it an increase in the wages? So what was requested was an increase, and increase is singular. So it's an increase in hourly wages that, so here we cannot have a plural verb for a singular subject. So correctly identifying that subject would help you eliminate these answers straight away, instead of now going to the railroad employees and diction and conciseness and all that. So straight away, we see that A is wrong. And now if we look at B, they have corrected this part by actually removing it. In addition to the increase in hourly wages requested last July, the employees of the railroad are now seeking an expanded program of retirement benefits.
You're watching Success with Bob Mwiti Show, presented to you by Upstake America. Upstake America is a consulting company that helps immigrants find amazing higher education and job opportunities in the tech industry in the United States. You can find our programs by going to www.upstakeamerica.com. Upstake America, we wake you up to the unlimited potential.
So on to our second example, so go ahead and try it on your own. So we have bluegrass musician Bill Monroe, whose repertory views on musical collaboration and vocal style were influential on generations of bluegrass artists, was also an inspiration to many musicians that included Elvis Presley and Jerry Garcia, whose music differed significantly from his own. So if we look at A, or actually let's look at the meaning first. So we have a musician here, Bill Monroe, and then we have some description here, and then what the sentence now wants to pass across was also an inspiration to many musicians. So A, and this is important because this is one of the of the situations where the subject is actually not underlined. So if it's not underlined, you have to make sure that whatever verb that refers back to this subject is actually correct. So we see musician Bill Monroe, whose repertory, views on musical collaboration and vocal style were. So this first verb is referring to these three. So 1, 2, 3. So this should be plural. So were influential in generations of bluegrass artists. So the musician was. So now this now is referring back to our main subject here. Was also an inspiration to many musicians that included Elvis Presley and Jerry Garcia, whose music differed significantly from his own. So the problem with this comes now here, because we see now this is kind of a modifier. What is it modifying? Many musicians. And of course, because many musicians are humans, you can't really use that. Unless maybe you could use who included Elvis Presley and Jerry Garcia. So for that reason, again, see now there's the main subject, and then you can have other additional subjects inside the sentence. Case in point, these and these. So you can have multiple subjects in one sentence. So you really have to understand the meaning of the sentence to be able to identify the correct modifier. So we can eliminate A. B was, remember, this is a plural subject. And then here we have was. So of course we have a subject verb error. So that is automatically out. C, were, so that's okay. An influence on generations of bluegrass artists. So the musician was also an inspiration to many musicians, including Elvis Presley and Jerry Garcia, whose music was significantly different from that of his own. So we have now our pick here. Also, again, this would help you not focus on the prepositions here. Although saying something is an influence on, it makes sense. But if you are saying someone was influential on, you now will start to argue between on and to. Okay, so our next example. So each of Hemingway's wives, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So Hadley, Pauline, Martha, and Mary were strong and interesting women, very different from the often pallid women who populate his novels. So here now we have a slightly different kind of sentence, but we see the meaning is that every one of Hemingway's wives was, so Hadley was strong and interesting. Same with Pauline, Martha, and Mary. But looking now at the grammatical aspect, so each of Hemingway's wives were strong and interesting women. So remember now, this is just giving more information. So our subject is here. So if it was Hadley, Pauline, Martha, and Mary were strong and interesting women, that would be okay. But when we say each of Hemingway's wives, in as much as they are 4, we are talking about one every instance. So using each makes this subject singular, meaning we can't use a plural verb there. So A is out. B, Hemingway's wives were all strong and interesting women. So you see now the change between each of Hemingway's wives and Hemingway's wives. So this now becomes plural because the subject here is all the wives. So were all strong and interesting women, very different from the often pallid women who populate his novel. So B is okay. Keep B. C. Strong and interesting women. So plural. Each a wife of Hemingway. So this now becomes a modifier. Then we have was, which is singular. Of course, you can see the mismatch in that. So this is out. Our answer is B. And then our last example for today. According to scientists, human expansion and human appropriation of Earth's finite resources are the cause of what may be the worst sweeping wave of species extinctions since the demise of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. So, looking at A, so we know, of course, the scientists are saying that human expansion and the appropriation of Earth's finite resources are the cause of what may be the most sweeping wave of species extinctions. So A, according to scientists, human expansion on subject and human appropriation of Earth's finite resources. So second, so this now becomes our plural subjects. So are. So that's okay because our subject is plural and our verb is plural. Going on to the second option. So human expansion along with the appropriation of the Earth's finite resources. So here now we have a problem because if we look at, we have one subject now. We have two subjects so far. So according to scientists, so this is plural. Human expansion, this is singular, along with their appropriation. So their, the only subject that can be referred back to by their is scientists. So of course we know that the sentence doesn't mean that scientists are appropriating Earth's finite resources. And in this case, we don't have maybe humans, the noun humans, where we could refer to it as there. So already we have a pronoun error there, along with the appropriation of Earth's finite resources is the cause of what may be the most sweeping wave. So you can eliminate B, and then C, human, according to scientists, human expansion along with its. So now we move from scientists to maybe checking what other noun that this would refer back to. So remember, we have human expansion here. Remember, this is not human. We are not talking about human. The subject here is expansion. So human, the expansion that is belongs to the humans. So human expansion. So human expansion is appropriating Earth's finite resources. So doesn't make sense. And then there is that verb. So we can see how identifying different subjects in a sentence. Sorry, we eliminate C and our answer here is A. You can see how identifying subjects in differing points of a sentence can help you make very, very easy eliminations. So I hope that has been helpful, and I'll see you in our next lesson. Bye.